Janet Gail Levine. In 1996, Samson March began kindergarten. His first day was not favorable, not due to the usual first-day nerves, but because his mother had been absent for a week. As his 6th birthday approached, his anxiety grew. According to his teacher, Samson had not bid farewell to his mother. His father, attorney Perry March, told everyone that Janet was on vacation. He acknowledged that they had a disagreement before her departure. The conflict began with his involvement in a $24,000 out-of-court settlement. It pertained to a harassment incident at his former workplace, Bass, Berry, and Sims. Janet had not been informed of it. She hastily packed her belongings and left. She entrusted Perry with a list of responsibilities to manage during her absence, referring to it as Janet's 12-day vacation. Despite Perry's assurances to Janet's parents that she would return for Samson's birthday celebration, Janet did not appear. This was unusual because the argument occurred on August 15th. If Janet had planned a 12-day vacation, even in anger, she was aware she had sent invitations indicating the party would occur on August 25th. Perry claimed she would return on the 27th. He attempted to cover for Janet. He informed the parents of Samson's kindergarten friends that she was visiting her brother in California. He cited an ear infection as the reason for her extended absence. However, Janet never came back. This left Perry questioning whether she had vanished or abandoned him, leaving him with the sole responsibility of raising their children. The daughter of one of Nashville's wealthiest lawyers was missing, but what caused this peculiar disappearance? Why would Janet abruptly leave her 5-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter? Had she been abducted? To understand, one must learn more about Janet Gail Levine March and Perry Avram March. Janet Gail Levine was born into privilege in 1963. Though it may seem overstated, her family consisted of prominent Jewish lawyers established in Nashville, Tennessee. Her father, Lawrence Levine, had founded an insurance law firm that evolved into Levine, Orr, and Geraciati. The eldest of 2 children, Janet aspired to become an artist, which was unconventional given her father's efforts to provide her a life of comfort. Her brother Mark followed in their father's legal footsteps. Yet, long before finishing at University School of Nashville, her art was displayed at the Jewish Community Center and various restaurants. Janet was considered an eccentric visionary within her circle, described by friends as a unique combination of sensitivity, nurturing instincts, and unconventional charm. She was fondly regarded as the quintessential artist type. A notable example of her unconventional nature was her ownership of a patent for a collapsible baby chair. She designed it, knew it was functional and marketable, yet never pursued commercial production. Amid her creative talents, Janet's close associates noted her propensity to become difficult during what they termed one of her moods. Janet pursued her art at the University of Michigan, and that is where fate intervened. Harry and Janet were both undergraduates there. Janet's roommate, Stacy Goodman, introduced them. Janet missed their first date. The pair had planned to attend a synagogue together on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, but Janet overslept. She offered profuse apologies, revealing the quirky, forgetful side he would come to know. When they eventually spent time together, they became inseparable. Almost immediately, they began cohabiting and continued to do so until her disappearance. Harry Avram March was born in 1961. His father, Arthur March, was a pharmacist of Romanian Jewish descent. His mother, Zipporah, was an Israeli immigrant. Originally, the family surname was Markovich. Due to frequent misspellings, it was changed to March. Harry was the eldest of 3 siblings. His younger siblings, Ron and Kathy, were still toddlers when tragedy struck their family. When Perry was only 9, his mother, Zipporah, died under mysterious circumstances. According to sources, she had taken Darvon, a painkiller for a headache caused by injury. She suffered a severe reaction and went into anaphylactic shock. The death certificate would later indicate her condition resulted from an illegal substance overdose. At the time, traditional society considered taking one's life shameful. Such incidents were often misrepresented. Rumors circulated in the community, but the truth never emerged. Following the death of their mother, Arthur moved his children to their summer home in Michigan. Harry attended La Lumiere School and thrived in both academics and sports. He held a first-degree black belt in karate. Arthur retired from the Army at the rank of lieutenant colonel. Harry enrolled at the University of Michigan. His options were limited since his father had already retired. As an in-state student, his tuition was lower. He He majored in Asian studies and had a known temper. In fact, a woman later alleged that Perry had struck her in the face while they were students at the University of Michigan, but Perry denied the claim. After graduating college, Perry began work as a broker for Oppenheimer and Company, an investment bank and financial firm in Chicago, Illinois. About 6 months later, Janet joined him. They spent 2 years in Chicago, while Perry worked as a management trainee at a subsidiary of Oppenheimer and Company. During this period, Janet took classes at the Art Institute, but she could not adjust to Chicago and wished to return home. She persuaded Perry to move to Nashville so he could attend Vanderbilt Law School. She also convinced her father to pay for Perry's tuition at Vanderbilt University Law School. Larry Levine agreed willingly. Why would they spend so much on someone not part of the family? When Janet introduced Perry to her parents, they recognized he was the one for her. He was hardworking and ambitious, and they trusted him. Janet's mother treated him with affection, as if he were her own son. Perry excelled in law school and became a member of the Law Review. He was ambitious, a tough negotiator, and valued financial success above all. Classmates joked he was the prime candidate for future indictment on securities fraud charges. Janet, ever romantic, grew impatient waiting for Perry to propose. She took matters into her own hands and proposed to him on one knee at Percy Warner Park. In 1987, Perry and Janet married in Nashville. Again, Janet's parents helped by providing a down payment for a house in an upscale part of the city. It was a hillside house on 32nd Avenue, very posh for students still in school. Perry appreciated the help, especially as his father's financial situation had declined. Arthur faced foreclosure on his Michigan home by Lakeshore Bank and Trust in early 1986. His property at 42, Apache Trail in Michigan became bank-owned. Larry Levine, Harry's father-in-law, bought the house from the bank for $115,000. He graciously allowed Arthur to live there rent-free. Later, Larry suggested that Arthur move to Nashville to be closer to Perry and Janet. Their love and generosity for their only daughter and son-in-law were immense. Even after Arthur moved, the Levines let him live in their home. They lent money to help him settle and were overall warm and welcoming. Regarding his Michigan property, Arthur did not know that Larry Levine had ended his lease in early 1987, citing failure to pay rent, and sold the house in 1988 for $144,500. After graduating, Perry received major job offers with high salaries from 2 prestigious New York law firms, Cravath, Swain & Moore, and Sherman & Sterling. Despite the appeal, he chose to join Bass, Berry & Sims, a prestigious law firm in Nashville. His starting salary was $42,500. During the late 1980s, Bass, Berry, and Sims experienced major changes. Pressure increased from prominent Nashville Jewish figures, and the firm had to diversify its legal staff. In 1988, Perry March and his Vanderbilt classmate Bennett Ross became the first Jewish attorneys to join the traditionally non-Jewish firm. Alongside them, Dale Wainwright, an African-American, and several female attorneys also joined Bass and Sims that year. This represented a significant milestone for the firm. Janet applied her talents and became a children's book illustrator. In 1990, 3 years into their marriage, their first child was born. They named him Samson. Unfortunately, Perry encountered trouble at work. In the summer of 1991, a paralegal filed a complaint regarding a letter that had appeared on her chair containing steamy words. It read, "I am lost. I have read that when a person drowns, they fight savagely for air. And then when fate ultimately defeats them and they succumb, they say it feels so good, so comforting." It also discussed the lack of intimacy in marriage and how it becomes mundane after a few years. A second letter appeared about 2 weeks later, dated July 31st. It was half a page long and, like the first, was typewritten. The writer instructed her to contact him in a peculiar way. She was told to check out a specific book from the library, and he would then contact her. Following the instructions in the letter, she removed the book, signed a checkout card, and left it in the space where the book had been. The writer grew increasingly excited, unaware it was a setup to catch him. On August 14th, he sent her another letter, ecstatic. By then, the security firm had recorded the culprit on tape. It was none other than Perry March. He was given an ultimatum: either face termination or resign. The paralegal went on a company-paid vacation. However, upon her return, Perry remained employed there. She repeatedly ran into him in the shared parking lot. It made her uncomfortable when she needed to use the restroom or get coffee. Upset by the situation, she decided to leave the firm and retain a lawyer. 2 weeks later, Perry departed. The firm's boss wrote a complimentary memo about him. Some lawyers believed the firm wanted to avoid trouble by quietly handling Perry's exit. They also found it suspicious that he left immediately after the paralegal quit. Perry was required to compensate the woman for harassment, keeping the payment secret from Janet. He agreed to pay $25,000 over the next 4 years. The first $12,500 in monthly installments, and the remaining half as a lump sum at the end of that period. This was intended to prevent a harassment lawsuit against him and the firm. Perry then joined his father-in-law's firm, Levine, Orr and Geraciati. He represented local businesses including the Platinum Club, Music City Mix Factory, and rich residents of Nashville, and even performed pro bono work for the Jewish Community Center. This helped him build a strong reputation. Janet continued her art, often eating lunch alone at nearby restaurants while sketching on her pad. She remained distant from friends and rarely discussed her personal relationships with them. Some people thought she sometimes appeared sad, almost depressed. In 1994, they became pregnant with a daughter. They decided to name her after Perry's late mother, Sephora. After the birth, the couple planned to build a 5,300-square-foot house with 4 acres of open land in Forest Hills, their new home. As always, the Levines were funding it. This was going to be Janet's dream house. She selected the street name herself. She initially called it Chocolate Street, but changed it to Blackberry Road after a neighbor complained. According to Perry, he was the one who took action in the marriage, while Janet had all the big ideas. Contractors recalled her being difficult as they worked on the house she had designed. Executing all the details she had planned could be challenging, but each time Janet became upset, she threw a fit. Contractors, accustomed to wealthy clients being particular, did not complain. Still, they recognized that whenever she was in a mood, it was Perry who stepped in and smoothed things over. Janet maintained a list of what she intended to achieve in life: a successful career, a husband, a house, and children. One by one, these goals were realized. Yet all of this was merely surface level. Behind closed doors, trouble existed in their paradise. The charming French-style house was meant to fulfill Janet's dreams, but the marriage had not truly been happy for some time. Janet distrusted Perry because he mismanaged their finances. Worried that Janet might seek a divorce, the Levines ensured all her property was in her name. Perry had confessed to Carolyn, Janet's mother, that he and Janet were experiencing marital difficulties. Shortly afterward, they began seeing a marriage counselor. In 1996, their marriage remained strained. On the day before her disappearance, August 14th, the children's nanny noticed Janet was quiet and aloof, unlike her usual talkative self. She worked at her computer with her office door closed, behavior that was unusual for her. The next day, August 15th, Janet's friends observed that she seemed preoccupied and almost afraid of Perry. The couple had an appointment with a divorce lawyer on August 16th. That same day, 2 carpenters performed about an hour of warranty work, inspecting everything. Janet watched them closely while Perry played with the children, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. That evening, Perry and Janet had an argument that ended their relationship. Perry knew they were both exhausted from fighting. With the children in bed, they were unaware of the conflict. According to Perry, his wife was furious and decided she had had enough. They went to the front porch to avoid disturbing the kids, and everything came out. Around 8 p.m., Perry suggested he stay at a hotel to give Janet space. She refused, stating instead that she would take a short vacation to a place she would not disclose. Perry reported that she packed clothes into 2 bags and a suitcase. She then took her gray Volvo 850 along with her passport, $15,000 in cash, and a bag of marijuana. She planned to be away for 12 days and prepared a list of chores for him to complete. 12 days is oddly specific, particularly as their son's 6th birthday was within 10 days, but she said she would return in time for it. Perry did not know the party's schedule, though Janet had already distributed invitations. Around midnight, he called the Levines to discuss the recent fight. Her parents, familiar with her tempers, advised him to let her cool off. However, Janet did not return the following morning. Her parents called her friends and checked hotels, but she was not registered anywhere. This caused concern. Together with Perry, they examined parking lots, visited the airport, and drove around. Around 10 a.m., Marissa Moody and her 6-year-old son arrived at Janet and Perry's house. Sampson and Sephora appeared happy and healthy. That Friday morning, Marissa felt ignored. She and Janet had planned for their sons to play together that day, but upon arrival, no one greeted them. Sephora was playing with the nanny outside. Sampson let them in, and they spent time together in the kitchen. Sampson told Marissa that his mother was not home, but his father was upstairs working. Marissa did not see Perry, but received a message from Sampson saying it was okay for her son to stay and play. She assumed Perry was simply ignoring her as usual. Marissa left her son to play and went home. The only unusual thing Marissa noticed was a large rug, which did not match the rest of the house's simple decor. When she returned later to pick up her son, the rug was gone. By Sunday night, August 17th, Carolyn Levine began to worry. Janet had never been away from her children for so long without notice. She considered calling the police, but Perry and his brother Ron, who had come to help, persuaded the Levines to wait until the 12-day period ended. Sampson's 6th birthday proceeded on August 25th as planned. The family anticipated questions from guests. Perry and the Levines decided to tell party attendees that Janet was in California visiting her brother Mark. They fabricated a story that Janet could not fly home because of an ear infection. The police were not notified until August 29th, 2 weeks after Janet disappeared. By that time, Janet's brother Mark had arrived in Nashville. Shortly after the report was filed, an MNPD police car came to the Levines' residence. Perry, also present, became extremely anxious at the sight. He struggled multiple times to stand from his chair due to uncontrollable shaking, and then asked Mark to call his brother Ron. On September 7th, Janet's Volvo was found parked at the Brixworth apartment complex on Harding Road, about 5 miles from her home. Most of the items Perry claimed she had taken remained inside. The detective who examined the vehicle noted dust and pollen on the exterior, indicating it had been unused for some time. Inside, police discovered Janet's purse containing her identification, credit cards, passport, and a small sum of cash, along with a packed suitcase and a toiletry bag. However, the gray suitcase Perry said Janet had taken was missing. The front passenger seat was pushed back, while the driver's seat was pushed forward. Janet's white sandals were neatly placed on the floor, suggesting they were not discarded in haste. Investigators also observed that her suitcase lacked certain items. There were no bras, toothpaste, or hairbrush, which a woman would normally pack. On the same day, a private investigator hired by the Levines spoke to Perry, who referred to Janet in the past tense. Perry later angrily demanded a list of everyone the investigator had contacted regarding Janet's car. 5 days later, the MNPD searched Perry's Jeep and found hair and fiber evidence in the back seat. During a police interview on September 10th, Perry appeared nervous and invoked his rights as an attorney. He provided a handwritten statement outlining his account of events on August 15th and the list of tasks he claimed to have performed. At this point, Carolyn Levine, Janet's mother, realized she had seen the exact same list on a yellow notepad, but in Perry's handwriting. The list Perry presented publicly was typewritten, which was uncharacteristic of Janet. Carolyn noted that Janet usually wrote her lists by hand or dictated them to others rather than printing them. When Janet wrote, she used only lowercase letters, whereas the list Perry showed used capital letters. Janet typically dated her lists at the top of the page, while Perry's list was dated at the bottom, which was more in line with his usual practice. Multiple witnesses informed police that Perry March had been seen with other women in the months leading up to Janet's disappearance. One witness reported seeing Perry leaving Belcourt Cinema arm in arm with an attractive blonde. Another claimed to have observed Perry having an intimate dinner with a brunette at Boundary Restaurant. Interestingly, Janet and her friends had dined at the same restaurant for a girls' night out on a Tuesday, just before she vanished. During a weekend in mid-September, Perry took the children to Chicago to celebrate Rosh Hashanah with his family. His father, Arthur, did not accompany them due to financial reasons. Meanwhile, the MNPD obtained a search warrant for the March house. They notified Perry's lawyer on September 16th of their plans to execute it the next day. When they searched the house, they found that the computer's hard drive had been forcibly removed and could not be located. Perry was informed in advance that they wanted to check the hard drive. The police continued investigating Perry's activities since Janet's disappearance. A resident who worked for an airline told the police that he had returned from work around 1 a.m. on August 16th and seen a surprised Perry walking a mountain bike past him. They also discovered that on August 21st, almost a week after she went missing, Perry had visited a local tire store. He purchased new tires for his Jeep, despite the existing ones being in excellent condition. Perry claimed he wanted a different brand. Records also revealed that Janet typically used a Visa credit card before her disappearance, while Perry primarily used a MasterCard. However, Janet had not used either card since she disappeared, while Perry had used both. The Levines were furious with him. Larry Levine was adamant that Perry had done something to his daughter. Perry had to move to a $3,000 a month rented home in the North Chicago suburb of Wilmette. He took most of his and Janet's belongings. Andrew Sachs, a friend who helped him pack, noticed Perry seemed frustrated. Perry was angry towards the Levines and the Nashville police. Andrew advised Perry not to contact them anymore. Diane, a friend of Janet's, mentioned a disturbing conversation. Asked her what she would say if he told her he had put Janet's body in her car, left with the kids at home, and then came back as if nothing had happened. According to phone records, Harry called his brother Ron in Wilmette at 9:11 p.m. on the night of August 15th. They talked for 3 minutes. Then at 9:14 p.m. Perry called his sister Kathy at her boyfriend's house in New Buffalo, Michigan. Their conversation lasted 4 minutes. Detectives think these calls were Perry's first attempts to hide a dark reality, that he had accidentally taken his wife's life. However, Perry says he just called his siblings to tell them that Janet had left him and the kids. Ron's wife, Amy, said they were getting ready for bed when Perry called. She confirmed Ron talked about Janet leaving and added that she scolded him for not being more supportive of his brother. Kathy March and her boyfriend Lee Braidwich both backed up Perry's version of the events. After Perry finished talking to his sister at 9:18 p.m., the police thought he may have hidden Janet's body in the woods or the basement of their house. Then, they believe he packed Janet's bags, put them in her Volvo, and drove the car to the Brixworth apartment complex. According to the police, he left the car there and either jogged or rode a mountain bike the 5 miles back home. Meanwhile, the police think Perry's 2 kids were sleeping upstairs. The Levines' wrath was too much for Perry, and he had to go. He was even disbarred and had to stop practicing law. There were suits filed for visitation rights and many disputes, but Perry knew he had to move out of their powerful reach. So he went to Mexico to stay with his father, who had moved there a few years back. In May 2000, the Levines visited Ajijic, Mexico, to demand visitation rights with the children, which Perry refused. They returned a month later with a Mexican court order leading to Perry's arrest on visa violation charges. Despite later dropping the charges, the Levines took the children from school and flew them back to Nashville. They sought permanent custody, believing they acted legally, while Perry considered it abduction. Tennessee lawyers took Perry's case pro bono, invoking the International Child Abduction Remedies Act. The Levines argued they had rightful custody under a visitation order and claimed the children's home was not in Mexico. They also cited risks and human rights concerns. The Levines believed Perry took the life of their daughter and filed a civil suit against him. They did not claim that the children witnessed it or that they had been harmed in his care. Perry's outstanding contempt citations did not meet the requirements to block his petition as a fugitive. Therefore, the children had to be returned to Perry after 39 days. The Levines contested every aspect, while Perry argued they had no legal standing. The judge criticized the Levines for exceeding the authority of the Mexican court order and incurring kidnapping charges in Mexico. After the children were returned, Perry settled in Mexico, worked as a business advisor, and remarried. Within a week of settling, Perry married a local woman, Carmen Rojas. In 2003, he achieved another legal victory against the Levines when the Tennessee Court of Appeals overturned the wrongful demise judgment. The court determined that the Levines had offered no new evidence of Perry's involvement in Janet's death. Their delay in amending the claim was unreasonable. Although Perry's behavior did not justify a default judgment, the court did not dismiss the wrongful claim on its merits. One judge dissented, arguing that the question of Janet's possible killing had been part of the proceedings from the beginning. In April 2006, Perry was found guilty of embezzling $23,000 from his father-in-law's firm, a crime that occurred over 2 years before Janet disappeared. 2 months later, he was convicted of conspiracy related to his wife's disappearance. Despite civil cases ruling in Perry's favor, the MNPD reopened Janet's case. Perry's business dealings in Mexico led to fraud allegations. In 2001, he allegedly threatened a lawyer and client there. Subsequently, Perry was indicted on charges of killing his wife, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse based on evidence presented to a grand jury. He was arrested in August 2005 and returned to Nashville, where he admitted to some details of the case but maintained his innocence. Perry attempted to recruit another inmate, Russell Ferris, to eliminate his in-laws. In exchange, he promised to post Russell's $3,000 bond, after which Russell would hide in Mexico. Perry's father, Arthur, was to provide a place to stay. Perry did not know Russell was cooperating with the police. He contacted Arthur, who instructed Russell on how to carry out the plan. Arthur explained the optimal time of day to target the Levines, where to obtain a gun, the type of gun to use, the need to wear surgical gloves, and the route to Ajijic afterward. Another inmate, Cornelius King, testified that Perry confessed to hitting Janet with a wrench during an argument and disposing of her body. Reno Martin, who had a cell next to Perry, recalled one day that Perry returned from a child custody, hearing visibly agitated. Frustrated by dealing with the Levines again, Perry exclaimed, "It should have been them that he had taken care of instead of," then abruptly stopped. Martin remembered that Perry appeared pale afterward. After a week-long trial, Perry was found guilty on all charges, 10 years after Janet's alleged killing. He received a 56-year prison sentence with concurrent terms for theft and conspiracy to murder his in-laws, followed by a consecutive sentence for killing Janet March. Arthur March was also arrested for assisting in the conspiracy to kill the Levines. To reduce his sentence, he agreed to testify against his son. He stated that Perry had asked him to help dispose of Janet's body after an accident occurred. Arthur agreed to assist his son. He could not recall exactly where they disposed of the body, which has never been recovered. Arthur's plea bargain was rejected, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, he died only 3 months later. Following Perry's conviction, the Levines lobbied for changes in Tennessee law, resulting in expanded grandparent visitation rights and termination of parental custody in cases where a parent is culpable for the other parent's death. Janet was commemorated with an art gallery at Nashville's Gordon Jewish Community Center. Perry maintains his innocence while incarcerated, despite ample evidence and testimony that led to his conviction. Moving on to the next case. The case of Kimberly Antonakis. Kimberly Antonakis was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in her family. Although she grew up surrounded by love and affluence, she was not spoiled. Her parents had come from modest backgrounds. Nevertheless, her father, Thomas, managed to achieve considerable success. He established his own company, which specialized in computers, earned substantial funds, and was happy to spend them on his beloved daughter and her desires. When Kimberly was a young girl, her parents divorced. The child was left to live with her mother. However, this did not weaken the bond between Kimberly and her father. He took her on weekends and spent all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new partner and decided to move to Florida, she faced a choice: to stay with her mother or remain with her father. Since she did not want to move, the young girl chose to live with her father. Kimberly was very close to him and enjoyed living in his care. As she grew, she became a well-behaved, sociable child and eventually a striking young woman with a radiant smile that always lifted spirits. She possessed a great sense of humor and a positive attitude. Kimberly was raised in a protected environment, surrounded by love and care, which shielded her from the harsher realities of life. As a result, she tended to see only the good in people and was largely unaware of life's darker aspects. Unfortunately, her open and kind nature would later bring her many sorrows. In 1994, Kimberly enrolled at the College of Staten Island. Shortly thereafter, she informed her father that she felt ready to live independently. Although Mr. Antonakis was concerned about her decision, he respected her desire for independence and chose not to oppose it. He promised himself that he would do everything possible to ensure her safety and well-being in her new living arrangements. Kimberly purchased a nice apartment for his daughter in a wealthy area of the city and installed an alarm system to enhance her security. He also acquired a parking space in the garage across the street, so she would not have to park far away. To stay in contact, he provided her with a cell phone and a pager. Mr. Antonakis did everything within his power to safeguard his daughter. His concerns were well-founded, considering his wealth and Kimberly's limited life experience. Kimberly was a diligent student who also worked part-time as an accountant at a reputable firm. She had declined her father's offer to join the family business, choosing instead to carve her own path. Kimberly led a typical student life, attending parties and socializing with friends. She refused her father's suggestions to return home, wanting to maintain her independence. This led to an unexpected situation when she allowed her friend Liz Pace and her family to stay in her apartment while their own was being renovated in early 1995. Kimberly, with her kind heart, invited the young people into her home. They spent days enjoying themselves together. One evening, Kimberly and a friend attended a party, getting ready and dressing up. After a night of dancing and fun, Kimberly drove them home but did not go inside, citing unfinished business. They hugged goodbye, unaware that they would never see each other again. After reporting concerns to the police, Mr. Antonakis went to the parking lot next to her apartment, only to discover that her car was missing from the garage. As he surveyed the area, he noticed a shiny object on the ground near a wall, a small gold earring. He recalled giving his daughter similar earrings and picked it up, just in case. However, Kimberly was nowhere to be found in the apartment. Instead, he encountered her guests, including a friend, her boyfriend Joshua Torres, and their 2-year-old child. Although Kimberly was aware of her daughter's decision, he did not agree with it. The tenants were concerned about the hostess' absence, and Joshua offered to help search for her. He stated that he would look for Kimberly and assist later. Kimberly then returned to the police station, explaining that his daughter had been in an accident, but the officers remained unconvinced. He decided to speak with Liz Pace, the last person to see Kimberly, showing her the jewelry he had found. Liz Pace confirmed that she had seen Kimberly wearing those earrings on the night she disappeared. Kimberly subsequently visited the places his daughter frequented, speaking with many people, but did not obtain any significant information. Joshua suggested that the search include not only Kimberly, but also her distinctive car. Kimberly went to the police station a third time, insisting that he would not leave until a search began. A detective eventually responded to his appeal, agreeing to take on the investigation despite standard protocol. To better understand the events surrounding Kimberly Antonakis, investigators began reconstructing her activities on February 28th. Kimberly spent the day attending college, followed by a few hours of work. After work, she returned home and had dinner with friends before heading out to a party with a friend named Liz Pace. The evening concluded with their return home around 4 a.m. After returning, Kimberly went to the parking lot for reasons that remain unclear. Both her apartment and garage were thoroughly examined, but no signs of struggle or foreign fingerprints were discovered. This absence of evidence suggested either a meticulous cleanup or that any potential intruder had worn gloves. The most puzzling aspect was the disappearance of Kimberly and her car without a trace, except for a single earring that was found. An analysis of Kimberly's bank account revealed that her last transaction had occurred the evening before she vanished, ruling out the possibility that she had run away. Based on the available evidence, detectives hypothesized that Kimberly had likely been kidnapped. The investigation expanded to include additional police officers. Due to the lack of concrete leads, law enforcement even considered information provided by a psychic. Witness interviews began with Liz Pace and Joshua. They revealed that 65 calls had been made from Kimberly's landline on March 1st. Joshua explained that he had made these calls in an effort to locate Kimberly, who was like a little sister to him. Liz Pace's testimony helped determine the clothing Kimberly had worn, and a portrait was created highlighting her distinctive tattoos, including a scorpion and an infinity symbol. Meanwhile, a search for the missing car was underway, with checks conducted at scrap metal collection points and other locations where the vehicle might have ended up. Unfortunately, no positive results were obtained. A check of Kimberly's cell phone was also unsuccessful. Police advised Kimberly to remain alert for any letters or phone calls he might receive, as they could be from kidnappers demanding a ransom. The Antonakis family remained in a state of uncertainty until March 4th. At approximately 2 a.m., emergency services responded to a reported fire at a large, abandoned house located at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Multiple fire crews battled the blaze until it was finally extinguished. Upon investigation, a charred body was discovered in the basement of the building. Further analysis by forensic experts revealed that the deceased was a woman between 20 and 25 years old, with remnants of long, black hair still intact. There were also signs of tape and evidence that her legs had been bound, with her hands tied behind her back. The most disturbing aspect, however, was that she had been alive at the time of the fire, as indicated by the presence of smoke in her lungs. Detectives initially suspected that the body might belong to Kimberly, the missing person. To confirm her identity, dental records were required. Meanwhile, an inspection of the ashes and the surrounding air revealed the scent of gasoline, strongly suggesting that the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence of a serious crime. Despite the absence of other evidence, the charred body remained, and upon closer examination, specialists identified tattoos matching the description of the missing woman. Dental records supported the investigators' suspicions, confirming that the body was indeed that of Kimberly Antonakis. As more details emerged, an eyewitness came forward, a man who often walked his dog in the area. The dog had behaved strangely in the days prior to the fire, appearing nervous and barking at the house for no apparent reason. It was only after the fire and the discovery of the body that the cause of the dog's behavior became clear. Kimberly had attempted to escape and called for help, but her cries went unheard by humans. However, the dog's acute hearing allowed it to detect the sounds coming from the basement, explaining its unusual behavior. When questioned by officers, the homeowner revealed that he had visited the building multiple times in recent days. He was trying to sell the house and would regularly check its condition, collect mail, and pick up receipts. However, he only inspected the house from the outside and never entered the basement. The homeowner claimed he never heard any suspicious noises, and if he had, he would have investigated. Investigators decided to re-question Joshua, as they had some reservations about him. They also found it oddly coincidental that his name began with the letter J. This time, Joshua mentioned a person he had been unable to contact on the day Kimberly went missing. A young man nicknamed Psycho, a Russian national who had previously dated Kimberly. The detectives investigated this new lead and discovered that the Russian had moved to the U.S. with his parents at a young age. As he grew older, he became involved with a gang and had a history of criminal activity. This led to the identification of the first suspect, who was soon taken into custody. During interrogation, Psycho was informed of his former lover's death, but his reaction shocked the detectives. The young man not only denied involvement in the crime, but he also displayed genuine emotional distress. Investigators brought him to the crime scene to observe his behavior, and it became clear that they had the wrong person in custody. Later, his alibi was confirmed, leaving the investigation at a standstill once again. The victim's family sought the psychic's help again. This time, she claimed to have seen 4 people involved in the crime. According to her, the kidnappers had initially intended to establish communication but failed. The kidnapping did not appear to have been planned with a fatal outcome in mind. The psychic concluded that new information would emerge soon. A few days later, Mr. Antonakis, hoping to gather leads, announced a $10,000 reward for information that could help apprehend the perpetrator. He could not shake off the psychic's words, pondering what she had meant about the kidnappers wanting to make contact, and what had prevented them from doing so. Upon returning home, he sat at the table and stared at his phone for some time. He suddenly recalled a minor detail from the day Kimberly went missing. He had listened to all the answering machine recordings, expecting his daughter to contact him. However, there were no messages except for 2 blank ones of complete silence. At first, he assumed it was a technical issue or a connection problem, but it later became clear that this was not the case. 5 days after her body was found, police located her car in a quiet area of town, not far from where her body had been discovered. Investigators had hoped to find fingerprints in the car, but it had been thoroughly cleaned. The only evidence recovered was her hair and a second earring in the passenger compartment. Although it initially appeared to be a breakthrough, it led nowhere. Kimberly's father was linked by rumor to a local mob hit because of his wealth and success. However, detectives found no evidence to support these claims. Grieving the loss of his daughter, he denied any involvement and was found to conduct his business openly and honestly. In July 1995, a burglary suspect was arrested at a New York City residence. Surprisingly, he shared information about the Kimberly case. The suspect claimed that an acquaintance had told him that his friends had kidnapped and killed her by burning her. Upon hearing the unidentified man's name, the officers began piecing together the crime. The man in question was Joshua Torres, Kimberly's roommate who had participated in the search for her. Detectives examined him more closely, calling him in for further questioning. Although he denied involvement in the crime, a lengthy conversation revealed a potentially incriminating statement. He mentioned that if he were the kidnapper, he would have fed the victim, Kimberly. This statement raised suspicions since there had been no public mention of the victim's hunger, thirst, or cold, and even her father was unaware of these details. To strengthen their case, investigators reviewed the suspect's past, finding a criminal record and a pattern of obsessive behavior. He was unemployed and financially dependent on his roommate while caring for her child, giving him unmonitored time to plan the crime. Knowing Kimberly's daily routine allowed him to abduct her and conceal her in a vacant house. It remained unclear why no ransom demands were made. Analysis of the suspect's calls revealed that he had lied about contacting Kimberly's acquaintances. The numbers dialed belonged to random individuals with no connection to her. Suspicious messages on his pager further implicated Joshua. He had long been a person of interest to detectives, and they eventually gathered sufficient evidence to arrest him. During interrogation, they informed him that Kimberly's ex-boyfriend was no longer considered a suspect. Pressed for more information, Torres claimed that he suspected his friends were responsible for her murder. He said he believed his friends had intended only to kidnap Kimberly for ransom and then release her unharmed. He admitted to being an accessory to the kidnapping, but maintained that he did not expect his friends to resort to violence. According to Torres, the plan was to demand a ransom and then release Kimberly, but events did not unfold as intended. The kidnappers became frustrated when their ransom demands were met with silence from Mr. Antonakis. Unbeknownst to them, their calls had been answered by Kimberly's father, and a ransom message had even been recorded. However, due to a technical issue, the recording was not saved on the answering machine. Feeling ignored and angered by the lack of response, the kidnappers decided to wait and see how events would unfold. The group feared public attention, and the psychic had claimed that the suspect's name began with the letter J. This information was published and broadcast on television, creating a cycle of events. Joshua was released on bail after speaking with the police, but subsequently disappeared. Around the same time, Jose was shot while walking with his wife. His wife later told investigators that her husband had not trusted Joshua and had been gathering evidence against him. She stated that Jose felt guilty about the kidnapping of Kimberly, but not about the house fire. He had intended to confess to the police, just as he had to her. Pager messages and statements from the suspects helped investigators reconstruct the details of the kidnapping and crime. 4 men were involved: Joshua, Julio Negrin, Jose Negrin, and Nicholas Brett, also known as Jay. Notably, Julio had previously proposed to Kimberly, but she had rejected him. The group was united by friendship and a shared criminal past. However, their actions were far surpassed by the horrific treatment Kimberly endured at the hands of the men. Nicholas had recently been released on bail thanks to his mother's intervention and had received a lenient fine for a crime that could have carried a prison sentence of over a year. Joshua had a history of serious offenses, including child abduction, violence against a minor, and illegal possession of weapons, despite his young age. Nevertheless, he too had received an inappropriately light sentence for his crimes. It became evident that Joshua was the ringleader, coordinating the group's actions. After Kimberly left the party, the men seized her in the parking lot, having apparently stalked her and waited for the ideal moment to strike when she was alone. A gun was used to intimidate Kimberly. When she resisted, the perpetrators tied her hands and covered her eyes, ears, and mouth with duct tape. They then placed her in the trunk of a car and drove her to an abandoned house, where she was taken to the basement and tied to a chair. To prevent her from making noise, they removed her shoes. The kidnappers told Kimberly that her father owed them money and that she would be released once the debt was paid. Julio was assigned to care for Kimberly, bringing her food and water twice daily and keeping her warm. However, fearing the consequences, Julio abandoned the house, leaving Kimberly without food, water, or warmth for 3 days. Once Julio left, the kidnappers informed Joshua, who recorded an audio message demanding a ransom of $775,000. The kidnappers then called Kimberly's father, leaving 2 empty messages. They waited for a response, genuinely perplexed as to why he had not contacted them. Meanwhile, Kimberly, left alone, suffered from dehydration, passed out multiple times, yet continued to struggle for survival. The kidnappers, growing angry and fearful of being caught due to the lack of ransom payment, decided to release Kimberly. Upon entering the basement, they found her unconscious and assumed she was dead. To eliminate evidence of the hostage, they planned to dispose of her. During the investigation, officers learned from Liz Pace that Joshua had used his roommate as an alibi, directing his accomplices while remaining at home with his child. Liz Pace initially claimed she was unaware of Joshua's involvement in Kimberly's kidnapping. However, at trial, she testified against him. She stated that after being interrogated, Joshua approached her and confessed to all his crimes. He then turned violent, physically assaulting her, silencing her, and issuing death threats before fleeing. Some time later, Joshua was apprehended by law enforcement. To advance the investigation, authorities brought the former friends together, informing them that Joshua had denied any involvement in the massacre. Upon hearing Joshua's denial, Julio chose to cooperate, revealing crucial information. Julio's cooperation played a pivotal role in securing Torres' conviction for Kimberly's murder. Ultimately, the trio faced charges of murder, arson, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. During the trial, evidence emerged that Joshua had repeatedly attempted to deceive investigators and evade punishment. After deliberating for approximately 10 hours, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Torres was sentenced to 58 years in prison. Nicholas Brett received the same sentence as Joshua. Julio Negrin was found guilty as an accessory after the fact and sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. Tomas Antonakis, Kimberly's family member, expressed satisfaction with the court's verdict and did not want the perpetrators to receive the death penalty. In his opinion, the death penalty would have been too lenient a punishment. Nicholas Brett was repeatedly abused and assaulted in prison and died of AIDS after serving 2 years. Julio Negrin was released after serving his 2-year sentence. Joshua Torres will not be eligible for release until 2053 at the earliest. Tragically, Kimberly's father, Tomas Antonakis, passed away from cancer in 2005. His family believes that the stress and grief caused by his daughter's death contributed to his illness. The life of Kimberly Antonakis, a beautiful young woman, was cut short in a shocking and devastating manner. Moving on to the next case. Linda Lunsford. Linda Lunsford was meant to pick up her daughters after work on Boxing Day 1996. That never occurred. Sometime after finishing her shift that morning, Linda disappeared without a trace. As the investigation began, authorities focused on someone close to Linda, the last person known to have seen her alive. However, they required more than suspicion to solve the case. They needed concrete evidence. Unfortunately for Linda's family, it would take 25 years before they obtained what was necessary to convict the person responsible. On December 25, 1996, 38-year-old mother of 5 Linda Lunsford was working her evening shift. She was employed at Walmart in the Village Marketplace Shopping Center in Chesterfield County, Virginia. She was assisting in ensuring the store was prepared for the post-Christmas clearance sales that were about to take place. At 8:30 a.m., Linda and coworker John Howard had finished their shift. They were having breakfast at a fast food restaurant not far from the store. The two had previously dated and had an on-and-off relationship. John and Linda had begun dating roughly 6 months prior before she ended the relationship. During their brief time together, Linda had grown close to John's children. This meant she wanted to maintain an amicable relationship between them. Furthermore, they worked together, and Linda wished to avoid any awkwardness. After breakfast, she was supposed to stop by her mother's home and pick up her 3 daughters. However, Linda never arrived. As the hours passed, concerns started to grow. Her mother wondered where else she could possibly be. Linda preferred to stick to a carefully planned schedule. She had to, as she worked 3 jobs to ensure her children had everything they needed. If Linda was late for something, it disrupted her entire day. When family members went out to search for her, they discovered something concerning. Her 1994 Burgundy Nissan Sentra was parked in front of the Food Lion store in the Village Marketplace. It was locked, and there was no sign of Linda. Even though the car showed no signs of a struggle, her family remained worried. That evening, Linda was reported missing to the Chesterfield police. They urged the authorities to act immediately. They explained that this was highly uncharacteristic for the devoted mother. Investigators reviewed CCTV footage from Linda's workplace. They confirmed she had left voluntarily. Their attention then shifted to John Howard. He was the last person known to have been with Linda that day. He was brought in for questioning and admitted to spending the morning with Linda for breakfast. John's children, however, provided a different account. When interviewed, the children told investigators they had seen Linda at their home that morning. This contradicted what John had said. Confronted with this information, John conveniently altered his story. He then claimed Linda had come to his house to discuss their relationship. He wished to resume seeing her, a sentiment Linda did not share. John insisted Linda had left his house that morning alive and unharmed. Investigators suspected John was not being truthful. With no other significant leads, they focused on him. Investigators examined his purchase history in the days leading up to Linda's disappearance. They found that John had bought a trash can, lighter fluid, and duct tape. While each item might have had an innocent explanation, given the circumstances, they raised suspicions. Considering him their primary suspect, Chesterfield police obtained a search warrant to examine his home. Once granted, they thoroughly searched every part of John's residence for signs of foul play. Nothing new was discovered during the search, except that John could not account for the whereabouts of the items he had purchased. Although no evidence had been found, the investigators still believed John was involved in Linda's disappearance. But intuition alone carries no weight in court. They required proof. Despite exploring every avenue, they could not locate any evidence linking him or anyone else to the case. Months passed with no sightings of Linda, and gradually the case went cold. In early May 2021, after years of false hope and frustration, Chesterfield police reported an update in the Linda Lunsford case. Decades later, they finally believed they had sufficient evidence to connect 62-year-old John Howard to Linda's disappearance. He was arrested on May 17th. He pleaded not guilty, and the case proceeded to trial in August 2022. During the trial, prosecutors presented a video from an initial interview conducted by the Chesterfield County Police Department, CCPD detective, and Howard. In the interview, Howard stated that his relationship with Linda had been intense. At that time, he admitted to seeing her the day after Christmas, but claimed that she had left his house alone and that he never saw her again. The trial lasted 1 week before the jury reached their verdict. They found John Howard guilty of taking the life of Linda Lunsford, even though her body was never recovered. The exact evidence that led to the conviction has not been made public. Matt Barlow, who had worked with both Howard and Linda at Walmart while he was between college semesters, expressed hope that the conviction would bring closure to their loved ones. "I am a dad, so the emotions of a mom working to provide for her kids, and then she disappears. What are their lives like?" he said. "I know that would have had to be very traumatic and sad. Just thinking about what happened, things run through your head." Barlow stated that he never met Linda's children, but she often spoke about them. "You could tell she really loved her kids," he said. "I am just truly sorry that that happened." Barlow described Linda as kind and outgoing, while he characterized Howard as quiet and no-nonsense. "I remember when he came back to work and we were told that Linda had disappeared or was missing, and that John was a potential person of interest. We were all shocked that one of our coworkers disappeared, and honestly, it felt scary. Even today, when I go into that store, there isn't a time I do not think about it." Barlow said that rumors had circulated while he worked at Walmart about what happened to Linda and whether Howard was involved. Howard remained in custody at Riverside Regional Jail, awaiting sentencing. In November 2022, Howard's attorney filed a motion to strike and set aside the August verdict. He argued that the evidence was insufficient to prove that Linda Lunsford had died and that the circumstantial evidence was inadequate to prove that Howard had killed her. Legal analyst Russ Stone reported that the judge held a hearing on the motion and denied the defense's request. That was the status of the case at the time, though a further twist occurred. While awaiting sentencing, Howard passed away on February 7, 2023, at VCU Medical Center, thereby concluding the case against him. On February 2nd, court documents indicated that Howard's attorney filed a motion to continue sentencing, citing the defendant's health problems. Attorney Greg Sheldon explained that Howard had been undergoing cancer treatment throughout the case proceedings. A pre-sentence report and status hearing were scheduled in Chesterfield Circuit Court for February 21st, but Howard died before the court date. According to Lakeisha Johnson from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, both the cause and manner of his death remain pending. His lawyer stated that Howard had recently suffered a fall at Riverside Regional Jail, and his daughter reported that he had fractured his orbital bone and several ribs and sustained 2 brain bleeds, which required 2 surgeries. For Linda's family, the news was devastating. While they did not mourn Howard personally, his death meant that he took with him any knowledge of where Linda's body had been disposed. Legal analyst Russ Stone also noted, "When you do not have a body, obviously question number 1 is, can you really prove a cause of death? And if you cannot, it is difficult to establish who is responsible." In this case, ultimately, after many hearings and much consideration, the court still upheld the jury's verdict, but these are definitely unusual cases. There is no record of any motion being filed that could have questioned Howard regarding the location of Linda's remains. Stone remarked that this might have been addressed during the defendant's sentencing. Her children never had the opportunity to properly grieve their mother or lay her to rest. Instead, they must live with the uncertainty of her final moments and the whereabouts of her remains. Perhaps one day someone will discover something, and they will finally be able to bring their mother home. Moving on to the next case. Lori K. Craig. In October 1997, skeletal remains concealed in the woods near Wilkeson, Washington were discovered. Despite the clues present, the identity of the remains remained unknown for nearly 3 decades. In October 1997, a mushroom picker traversing the forests in Wilkeson made a grim discovery. While moving through the dense woodland of Pierce County, he encountered skeletal remains partially obscured from view. The site, a remote area along Gale Creek Road, lay roughly 9 miles from Wilkeson School and just south of Buckley. Shocked by the find, the mushroom picker promptly contacted local authorities. The police arrived quickly at the scene and commenced a thorough examination. The skeletal remains appeared to have been intentionally concealed. The body had been positioned in a shallow depression and carefully covered with logs, a clear indication that someone had attempted to hide it, implying foul play. The circumstances immediately transformed the discovery into a criminal investigation. As forensic teams processed the area, they collected the clothing and items found with the remains. The victim had been wearing a dark blue long-sleeved sweatshirt displaying the Pacific Lutheran University logo alongside a basketball graphic and the word Lutz. She also wore size 7 Union Bay blue jeans and white Reebok tennis shoes trimmed in yellow and green, marked as size 4.5. These details provided investigators with some clues, but no definitive identification. A preliminary examination of the bones indicated that the victim was a female, approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall, likely between the ages of 20 and 50. Despite this information, the woman's identity remained unknown. No missing persons reports corresponded to the description, and the clothing offered no direct leads. With limited forensic technology at the time to advance the case further, investigators encountered a frustrating impasse. The remains were carefully preserved, and the case remained open, though it gradually slipped into obscurity. The cold case experienced a major development nearly 12 years later, in August 2009, when the details of the unidentified woman, known only as the Pierce County Jane Doe, were formally entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Although the case had stagnated for more than a decade, this step ensured her story would not be forgotten. It also allowed for the possibility that future technological advancements could revisit her case with new tools and perspectives. In 2023, 14 years later, renewed efforts to identify the woman ultimately led to a breakthrough in April 2025. Evidence preserved from the remains was submitted to OTHRM. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing and genealogical analysis, scientists were able to match the unidentified DNA to living relatives. After decades of uncertainty, investigators succeeded in assigning a name to the remains: Lori K. Craig. Lori was born on December 17, 1959. In 1982, she married Thomas Craig. Their marriage lasted 6 years before ending in divorce in 1988. The reasons behind their separation remain private, as neither publicly shared details about their relationship or its conclusion. Lori later remarried, wedding her second husband, Ronald Martin, in March 1995. They lived in Pierce County, Washington, where they remained for years. Lori was married to Ronald at the time of her disappearance. He passed away from natural causes in 2020, closing one potential avenue for direct questioning. Despite the identification, new questions soon arose, particularly the unsettling fact that Lori had never been reported missing. For investigators, This fact stood out as both puzzling and deeply concerning. Detectives reopened the case, determined to uncover the truth behind Lori's death. Authorities issued public appeals for information, specifically requesting that anyone who had known Lori or her late husband between 1995 and 1997 come forward. They hoped that someone, regardless of how distant the memory or seemingly minor the detail, might possess a piece of the puzzle capable of leading to justice. As the investigation progressed, one detective commented on the complexity of the renewed inquiry, stating, "We are literally starting from the ground up on now opening an investigation that is 30 years old." The remark reflected both the magnitude of the task ahead and the dedication of those involved in finally resolving the case. The passage of time had eroded many leads, yet investigators remained committed to exploring every possible angle. Lori has living family members, and detectives have been in contact with them to aid in solving the case and providing closure for the family. After so many years without answers, the identification offered a starting point, but not a conclusion. Anyone with information about Lori is urged to submit a tip to the Pierce County Sheriff's Office via their Android or iPhone app. Tips can also be submitted anonymously through Crime Stoppers by visiting tpcrimestoppers.com or calling 1-800-222-TIPS. Moving on to the next case. The case of Lucy Davis. On February 5, 2010, at York Crown Court, Harold Landry's trial commenced under intense scrutiny. Harold was accused of taking the life of his wife, Lucy Davis. The final hearing, marking a climactic conclusion to this grim saga, occurred in early February 2011 at Wolverhampton Court. The courtroom hummed with tension as Judge David Fett, known for his uncompromising demeanor, presided over the proceedings. Harold Landry, a 64-year-old man, was the central figure in this legal battle. The prosecutor, Rachel Brand, presented the evidence against Harold, depicting a chilling account of the events leading to Lucy's tragic death. Brand's cold and precise presentation of facts left little room for doubt regarding Harold's culpability. Harold Landry had been convicted of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Davis. Harold, who was meant to be Lucy's protector, now stood condemned as her killer. Pete, Harold's friend and lawyer, unable to endure the burden of defending him, passed the case to Andy Childs, an experienced attorney. Childs faced the formidable task of convincing the court that Harold had not intended to kill Lucy, but had been driven to uncontrollable aggression. Throughout the trial, Harold was a figure of misery and regret. He wept openly, professing his love for Lucy and expressing profound remorse. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, hoping to lessen his sentence. The defense argued that Harold's actions were the result of an irresistible outburst of aggression, provoked by circumstances beyond his control. However, this argument encountered fierce opposition. The prosecution presented the court with shocking photographs of Lucy's injuries. The sheer brutality depicted in these images spoke volumes, overshadowing Harold's claims of unintentional harm. Each piece of evidence painted a bleaker picture of Harold's actions on that fateful day. When the final verdict was rendered, Harold Landry was sentenced to life imprisonment. The decision provided a measure of closure to the legal process, but left an enduring mark on all involved. This tragic case serves as a somber reminder of the delicate boundary between love and violence. It underscores the unpredictable nature of human relationships and the devastating consequences when that boundary is crossed. Lucy Davis's death stands as a poignant example of how swiftly love can transform into a nightmare, leaving a trail of heartache and loss. Domestic violence can have fatal consequences, as it did in 1971 amid the picturesque landscapes of Wales. Born in the small town of Pontypridd, Lucy Davis was a charming girl whose childhood was filled with unconditional love and warmth. Roger and Andrea, Lucy's parents, fostered an atmosphere of happiness and comfort in their home. Together with her younger sister Anna, Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glencoe. Lucy took her first steps amid majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her charming smile and kind heart distinguished her from other children. She easily won the affection of her teachers and peers. Recognizing his daughter's passion, her father allowed her and her sister to immerse themselves in the magical world of horseback riding. Under the strict guidance of experienced instructors, they learned the fundamentals of this noble pursuit, conquering peaks and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became accomplished horse riders. Spending her childhood in Wales was a true paradise for Lucy Davis. She flourished there like a beautiful flower, absorbing the beauty of nature and the love of her family and those around her. Horse riding not only provided Lucy and Anna with loyal companions, but also served as a true school of life. Horses taught them discipline, self-control, and responsibility. The sisters' talent and perseverance were recognized in prestigious competitions, where they earned multiple awards. Yet Lucy's world was not confined to the riding arena. Her keen intellect and thirst for knowledge motivated her to explore new pursuits. Music became another passion for young Lucy, who eagerly undertook flute and piano lessons, honing her skills. Her efforts bore fruit. Within a year, she played both instruments proficiently, captivating audiences with her talent. Lucy was thrilled to join the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where her musical journey continued to flourish. She devoted herself to refining her musical abilities, finding an outlet for her love of music and creativity within the school choir. Music was more than a pastime for her, it was a profound means of expression. Growing up, Lucy's days blended carefree play with diligent work, instilling in her a strong foundation of dedication and intellectual curiosity, qualities that would shape her future accomplishments and endear her to those around her. In high school, Lucy encountered Garrett Jenkinson, a fellow Welshman shrouded in mystery. Despite the enigma surrounding Garrett's past, the two developed a close friendship that deepened over time. Although Garrett harbored romantic feelings for Lucy, he chose to keep them buried deep within himself. Upon graduating in 1998, Lucy remained determined to pursue a musical career and higher education. She gained admission to the University of Yorkshire in northern England, initially envisioning herself as a future music educator. However, as her ambitions evolved, Lucy found herself drawn to the vibrant artistic environment of a metropolitan city. This newfound aspiration led her to Grimy McAllister, whose worldview and sense of humor resonated profoundly with Lucy. Their relationship flourished, prompting Lucy to introduce Grimy to her parents. The initial meeting proved successful, reinforcing the bond between Lucy and Grimy and laying the foundation for their future together. Roger and Andrea immediately recognized him as the ideal life partner for their daughter. After careful deliberation, Lucy and Grimy decided to move in together, establishing their own family. Sometime after moving in, Lucy proposed the idea of official cohabitation, which Grimy agreed to in 1995. Even while continuing their college studies, they welcomed a son, whom they named James. Lucy chose to pause her own pursuits to focus on caring for her child, while Grimy continued his studies and took night shifts at the city's postal sorting department to provide for their family. Lucy was thrust into a whirlwind of challenges, yet she faced them with optimism and determination. Despite her deep love for her family, the months spent at home with her child were tinged with loneliness. She and her husband rarely found time together, and his night shifts only exacerbated the sense of isolation. Seeking connection and solace, Lucy created a social media account under the pseudonym Miseria, immersing herself in a virtual community where she could share her experiences and form new friendships. It was in this online space that her attention was drawn to a user named Harold Landry, a 53-year-old entrepreneur from Louisiana. Rising from humble beginnings, Harold's determined pursuit of independence and success from a young age led him to establish a thriving company manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. His diligence brought him not only material wealth, but also prestige, eventually elevating him to billionaire status. Conversations with Harold proved enlightening for Lucy. His life experiences, steadfast dedication, and boundless generosity captivated her. Nevertheless, their relationship faced significant challenges. The disparities in age, social standing, and lifestyle created tension between them. Harold's life appeared extravagant and diverse, filled with eccentric hobbies and lavish acquisitions, including real estate holdings in KML. In Mexico, Harold's marital history remained opaque. He had been married twice and divorced twice, yet no children from these unions were known. However, in 1992, Harold's life shifted dramatically when he divorced his second wife and encountered Geraldine Price. Geraldine, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico, was 20 years his junior and married to Chris Price, with 2 children. Despite her familial obligations, Harold managed to win the heart of this young woman. On February 6, 1994, Harold organized a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They hired a babysitter, Christian Hutton, to care for the children, allowing them an evening free of parental responsibilities. As the night concluded, Harold escorted his girlfriend home and, in a gesture of courtesy, offered Christian a ride home, which she accepted. Unbeknownst to Harold, fate had other plans. Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been monitoring the couple. Upon witnessing the clandestine affair, Chris resolved not to ignore the situation. He pursued Harold, and when they stopped at a red light, unleashed a torrent of accusations. Despite Harold's composed demeanor, the confrontation escalated. In a fit of rage, Chris dared Harold to shoot him. Without hesitation, Harold drew his firearm, warning Chris of the consequences. Ignoring the warning, Chris provoked Harold further. In a swift, decisive action, Harold fired, striking Chris in the neck. Miraculously, prompt medical intervention saved Chris's life. In 1997, Harold faced trial in St. Mary Parish courts, charged with the attempted murder of Chris Price. His attorney, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold had been entrapped. Although the jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, following an appeal, Harold was released on parole, having paid a fine and completed community service. Harold found himself forever indebted to Pete for his legal representation and unwavering advocacy, which ultimately secured his freedom. As their friendship deepened, Harold and Chris reached a settlement agreement, though the exact compensation remained undisclosed. Settling in Covington as a wealthy man, Harold openly shared his past with Lucy, including failed marriages and a troubling incident. Rather than repelling Lucy, Harold's revelations only seemed to heighten her attraction toward him. His gift of persuasion captivated her, and after parting ways with Grimy, Lucy and Harold decided to embark on a romantic relationship. Eager to shield their love from unnecessary complications, Harold endeavored to avoid any potential troubles. In the early 2000s, he traveled to England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andrea, who, despite initial surprise at the age difference, supported their daughter's choice wholeheartedly, refraining from interference in their relationship. Expressing his devotion through lavish gifts, including expensive jewelry, Harold spared no expense in fulfilling Lucy's desires. His love for her grew so intense that thoughts of marriage lingered constantly in his mind, yet he insisted on perfection before taking the plunge. Seeking to fortify their bond, Harold extended an invitation to Lucy, her son Jameson, and her ex-husband Grimy for an unforgettable trip to Mexico. To Harold, Mexico was not merely a vacation spot. It represented paradise, amplified by the proximity of Pete's apartment, lending an air of comfort to their excursion. Inspired by the purchase of a diamond engagement ring, Harold excitedly shared the news with Pete, who harbored suspicions about Lucy's fidelity due to her frequent rendezvous with Grimy. Blinded by love, Harold proposed to Lucy, and she accepted his proposal, leading to their marriage in the midst of 2003. Acquiring a $1 million home in Warshire County, their new family life in the neighborhood overflowed with joy. Welcoming Jameson into the family with open arms, Harold treated him as his own, fostering a strong familial bond. Soon after their wedding, their daughter, Hearth, was born, becoming the apple of their eyes. Surrounded by supportive neighbors like Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, Lucy and Harold's familial ties deepened with each passing day. However, as time went on, issues began to arise in their relationship. Harold grew increasingly demanding, expecting Lucy's unwavering obedience. Lucy, who had always been an independent woman, was not prepared to acquiesce to Harold's every demand. Arguments and disagreements became more frequent, casting a shadow over their family life. Their son, Jameson, bore witness to this tense atmosphere, which negatively impacted his childhood. Even their neighbors began to take note of Lucy and Harold's escalating reliance on alcohol, exacerbating their familial problems. However, when the arguments and shouting ceased, neighbors interpreted it as a sign that the family was attempting to reconcile. In 2009, Lucy found solace in virtual conversations with her old school friend, Garrett, via social media. Sensing his wife's emotional distance, Harold made the difficult decision to leave for Mexico, allowing Lucy space. In his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit, blindsiding Harold upon his return. Lucy swiftly filed for divorce, prompting Harold to begin an affair with their neighbor, Rachel Walbon. The divorce proceedings were marred by disputes over property division. Lucy, adamant about keeping the house for the sake of their children, opposed Harold's insistence on selling it. Their disagreements intensified as Lucy revealed unsettling truths about Harold's past, further fueling the acrimony. Amidst the emotional turmoil, Lucy accepted Garrett's invitation to spend time with him in Wales, making no effort to conceal her phone conversations from Harold upon her return. Despite her attempts to salvage their relationship, the constant arguments persisted, and the tension between them became unbearable for Jameson and their daughter, Harth. On the evening of February 1st, 2010, as the day drew to a close, Harold, intoxicated from several glasses of wine, was startled by the delivery of a package addressed to their neighbor, Stephen Kennedy. It was closer to 9 p.m. when Harold returned from work. Stephen noticed a notification that his parcel had been delivered to Harold. Seeing Harold at home, he approached him to retrieve his package. Harold greeted him warmly and offered him a drink. Stephen, not refusing a glass of wine, agreed, and Harold poured him one. As Stephen entered and greeted Lucy, he observed that Harold was already inebriated. After a single glass of wine, Stephen took his parcel and left. Shortly thereafter, a heated argument erupted between the couple regarding furniture for their new house. Jameson, hearing the commotion, rushed into the kitchen to witness Harold striking his mother with a kitchen utensil. Reacting promptly, he dialed the police and comforted his sister, Lucy, who was fleeing the house with the children. Lucy sought refuge at Stephen's house, hoping for assistance. However, en route, Harold caught up with her and viciously attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. Callously, he dragged her body under a bush and disappeared. Hearing Lucy's screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered her body. Initially thinking she had fainted, he quickly realized the severity of the situation. Officer Steve C. Fox, arriving at the scene, promptly called for an ambulance and commenced a search for Harold. Despite efforts, Harold evaded capture, leaving behind terrified children who sought shelter until the police arrived. This tragic incident marked the beginning of their family's downfall and the start of a grueling journey toward justice. An ambulance promptly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but it was too late. Lucy succumbed to her injuries upon arrival. Meanwhile, consumed by fear and remorse, Harold sought solace at the doorstep of his friend Rachel. With trembling voice, he confessed to committing a heinous act but withheld the details. In an attempt to atone, he transferred a substantial sum of $40,000 to Rachel and relinquished all his assets, including cash, car keys, and paychecks. After Harold headed home, the police began their search for him. They scoured the streets and interviewed witnesses, but Harold seemed to vanish into thin air. Finally, fortune smiled upon the detectives when Harold was arrested while leaving Rachel's house. His face, distorted by fear and remorse, spoke volumes. Lucy's parents, Roger and Andrea, were overwhelmed with grief. In an official press release, they expressed immense sorrow for the loss of their daughter and declined to comment further. The forensic medical examination confirmed Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. Evidence found at the crime scene and the testimony of Jameson, Lucy's son, who witnessed the tragedy, became pivotal in solving the case. The tale of Harold and Lucy is a love story turned nightmare. Although the trial concluded, the echo of the tragedy will resonate for years to come. Harold Landry, found guilty of Lucy's death, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 16 years before parole eligibility. He would be 82 years old upon release, but no sentence could bring Lucy back. Roger and Andrea found solace in the fair verdict, though their hearts remained heavy with grief. Harold Landry maintained his innocence, vowing to appeal the verdict, claiming he would not change anything, even knowing the future. The Landry family remained resilient, promising to preserve Lucy's memory by embodying her best qualities for their grandchildren. Despite the irreparable loss, Lucy would forever remain a symbol of light and love in their hearts. Looking ahead, the Landry family embraced hope. Harold received the punishment he deserved, while Lucy's legacy continued to inspire her loved ones. With Lucy's love and light in their hearts, the Landry family found the strength to move forward, carrying her memory with them into the future. Moving on to the next case. The case of Maribel Ramos. California is among the most notable states in the United States, recognized for its mild climate, scenic beaches, and globally renowned entertainment industry. Many people arrive in California, hoping to create a better future. However, not everyone fulfills their aspirations. For some, California represents a land of opportunity. But for others, it brings severe hardships. Maribel Ramos had a long-standing ambition of joining law enforcement. However, she needed to pursue higher education, and to finance that, she enlisted in the military. Maribel completed 2 combat deployments in Iraq and intended to graduate from California State University Fullerton with a degree in criminal justice. A veteran of the U.S. Army, she had served for 8 years and was eager to transition back to civilian life. Maribel understood her objectives and was resolved to accomplish them. Following her military service, she redirected her attention to new prospects, including her intention to enroll at a university in California, Orange, California, where she had lived until her mother's death in 2009. Then Maribel contacted her sister, Lucy, asking whether she could move in with her. Lucy refused, explaining that she and her daughter were established in another place, but she would think about moving in with Maribel if she could not secure a roommate. To locate a roommate, Maribel posted an advertisement and soon obtained multiple replies. One response stood out, from a man named Kwang Choi Joy, who described himself as looking for accommodation while searching for employment. After meeting Kwang, both Maribel and Lucy considered him calm and well-educated. He told the sisters that he had never married and did not have children. After Kwang moved in with Maribel, it soon became apparent that he was very withdrawn. He spent much of his time alone at home and seldom went out. To assist him in socializing, Maribel began inviting Kwang to family gatherings, dinners, games, and parties where he met many of her relatives. Gradually, Maribel altered her routine and started taking part in a weekly softball game, which was uncharacteristic for her. In May 2013, she vanished when she did not appear for a planned event. Maribel's family and friends made numerous efforts to contact her, but none succeeded. They visited her apartment, but discovered no trace of her. Alarmed, they reported her missing, leading authorities to begin an inquiry. Police officers went to Maribel's apartment, but got no answer after knocking on the door. Everything outside appeared ordinary, with no evidence of disturbance. There were no shattered windows or signs of forced entry. Consequently, the officers chose to enter the apartment to look for Maribel. There were no signs of criminal activity at Maribel's residence. A search indicated that she was not preparing for a trip. All her clothing was orderly, except for her mobile phone, wallet, and identification. Since Maribel's vehicle was parked outside, investigators grew suspicious. Maribel was not someone who would disappear without explanation, which heightened fears that she might be at risk. When investigators arrived, Kwang Choi Joy unexpectedly came up to them. He stated that he had last seen Maribel the previous night around 10 p.m. when he returned from a walk. In surveillance footage from that evening at 8:15 p.m., Maribel had collected a check for her apartment, which was the final time she was observed in public. She calmly took the envelope and departed, displaying no signs of anxiety or haste. At that point, Maribel's family turned to social media for help. They posted a photograph of Maribel online, requesting that anyone with information about her get in touch. They sought to involve as many individuals as possible in the search. Meanwhile, investigators tried to trace Maribel's mobile phone, but it had been switched off. During their inquiry, police discovered that Maribel had recently begun seeing a man named Paul Lopez. He was the last individual to speak with her by phone the day before she disappeared. As a result, the police requested that Paul come to the station for questioning. Paul seemed self-assured and stated that he and Maribel were still at an early stage in their relationship. He also said that he was dating other women. When asked whether Maribel was seeing anyone else, Paul replied that he had not asked about that. He confirmed that he talked with Maribel on Thursday evening and mentioned that he was working a shift from 4 p.m. until midnight that day, so they did not meet face-to-face. Investigators noticed that although he was cooperative, there was no guarantee he was telling the truth. However, Paul's truck was equipped with a GPS tracker, enabling officers to trace his movements that evening. The records showed that Paul was nowhere near Maribel's residence. Paul brought up Maribel's roommate, Kwang, mentioning that their relationship had recently worsened. He explained that Maribel frequently complained about Kwang's failure to pay rent punctually. During one discussion, Paul overheard Maribel telling Kwang that she wanted him to vacate the apartment the following day. In a speakerphone conversation, Paul cautioned Kwang that he would be forced out if he did not leave as instructed. Paul offered his assistance to Maribel and said he would come over if she required help, but she refused, saying it was unnecessary. This marked their last exchange. After the dispute between Maribel and Kwang became known, investigators found out that Kwang, who was 54 years old, had relocated to the United States from South Korea during his teenage years. He had no notable criminal history, and there was nothing suggesting any unlawful behavior in his background. However, additional inquiries revealed a pattern of anger problems. Kwang's sister had previously lodged a complaint against him because of his explosive temper. While reviewing his social media accounts, investigators observed that Kwang and Maribel Ramos seemed to have a close connection. Nonetheless, when they spoke with Maribel's relatives, they discovered that her relationship with Kwang was not as perfect as it appeared in their social media images. It seemed that although they maintained a friendly connection, Kwang wanted something more serious. In the summer of 2012, Lucy received a call from Kwang, who confessed that he was in love with Maribel and was attempting to locate her because of those feelings. Lucy later told Maribel about the conversation and advised her to firmly reject Kwang's emotions before matters intensified. Maribel then confronted Kwang, clearly stating that she did not share romantic feelings for him. Initially, Kwang appeared to accept the rejection calmly. However, over time, he began taking drastic measures to win Maribel's affection. He altered his clothing style, got a tattoo, and spent more than $10,000 on cosmetic surgery to look younger. Police uncovered troubling evidence: a frantic phone call from Maribel to them just 12 days before she disappeared. In that call, Maribel stated that she felt unsafe around her roommate. To better understand the dynamic between Maribel and Kwang, investigators brought him in for questioning. He seemed composed and cordial, showing concern about her disappearance. Kwang asserted that they had been roommates for approximately a year and a half, enjoying activities such as cruises, dancing, and parties together. However, investigators suspected that the situation was not as perfect as Kwang depicted it and pressed him to clarify Maribel's 911 call. Kwang said that he and Maribel had gone to karaoke that evening and eventually argued. He pointed out that Maribel's behavior when consuming alcohol could be either very sociable or confrontational. When detectives questioned him about the dispute, Kwang stated that it happened on Thursday night and concerned the rent. He suggested that detectives should look further into the matter since he last saw Maribel at 9 p.m. when he went for a drive to calm down after their disagreement. When he came back, she was gone, and he assumed someone might have taken her because her car remained where it was parked. Although Kwang's explanation sounded plausible, certain details about his appearance aroused suspicion. He claimed that he had scraped himself on bushes while walking in the park, which seemed unusual. At this point in the investigation, there was no proof linking Kwang to Maribel's disappearance. As the days went by, the effort to locate Maribel grew more challenging, and the chances of finding her alive diminished. To uncover additional evidence, detectives chose to involve forensic specialists to meticulously inspect Maribel's apartment, hoping they would uncover clues that had previously been missed. During this period, Kwang cooperated with law enforcement, permitting them to search his rental vehicle without a warrant, including a thorough examination by a police dog trained to detect human remains. However, the dog did not detect any traces inside the house or the vehicles. Meanwhile, several days after Maribel's disappearance, Kwang posted messages on forums devoted to the case, expressing how much he missed his friend. Despite trying to present himself as a mourning roommate, Kwang began distancing himself from Maribel's family, whom he had earlier regarded as friends. He also refused to take part in most vigils and search efforts for her. This conduct raised suspicions among investigators, who hoped he might make a mistake and disclose information about Maribel. Kwang went to a public library to access the internet because he had surrendered his phone and laptop to the police. Detectives asked for surveillance recordings, which revealed nothing suspicious. He used the computer for approximately 2 hours before returning it. They were keen to review the browser history on the laptop, but it had been erased to safeguard users' privacy after it was returned, increasing the police's frustration as they persisted in their search for Maribel. Maribel's family were heartbroken when she vanished, and no one knew where she had gone or what had happened to her. In their despair, her relatives distributed flyers across the city, hoping someone had seen her or possessed information about her location. However, this effort proved insufficient. Recognizing that they needed to reach more people, they created a social media page to share Maribel's story and request assistance from anyone who might have knowledge about her. For 2 weeks, police had no leads regarding her disappearance. Then an unexpected development took place. Maribel's family announced on social media that they would arrange a walk and search for her in Majeska Canyon. Around that time, detectives discovered that Kwong had returned the rented vehicle, which heightened their suspicions. They chose to examine the car once more. During the initial inspection, the police dog had not identified any scent, but this time it immediately reacted to an odor coming from the trunk. Although this evidence was insufficient to justify an arrest, it suggested to detectives that they were moving in the right direction. When Kwong returned to the library to use a computer again, he noticed on Facebook that Maribel's family was organizing a walk-and-search event in Majeska Canyon. Unaware of this, police had secured a warrant permitting them to remotely monitor the laptop he was using. Detectives were able to observe his search history, which contained inquiries about how long it takes for a human body to decompose. He also searched for the specific location in the canyon where Maribel's family intended to assemble for the search. After using Google Maps, he zoomed in and out of an area approximately 10 miles from Majeska Canyon. The officers tracking his activity were stunned. It became apparent that Kwong had unintentionally exposed the place where he had concealed Maribel's body. Investigators quickly proceeded to a remote location with no nearby residences. After searching for half an hour, they found a shallow grave. Although they suspected the remains were Maribel's, they required forensic verification before arresting Kwong. Forensic specialists confirmed the victim's identity through dental records. The remains were indeed those of Maribel Ramos. Because of various animals in the area, establishing the precise cause of death was impossible. When Kwong saw officers approaching, he attempted to flee by leaping out of a window, but he was captured and brought to the police station. He persisted in denying any involvement in Maribel's disappearance, unaware that police had already identified her remains. Kwong faced multiple charges. Maribel's family continued to honor her memory, yet it became evident that the details surrounding her death were too unclear to provide definite answers. Authorities could only speculate about how she might have died at Kwong's hands. Prosecutors argued that Kwong was in love with Maribel while she did not return his feelings. Considering Maribel's combat training, which might have enabled her to easily overpower Kwong in a direct confrontation, it was assumed he must have planned an ambush. Investigators believed he entered her bedroom at night and suffocated her as she slept. He then allegedly put her body into the trunk of his rented car and drove to an isolated area where he had to crawl beneath a tight wire. Although there was speculation that he relocated Maribel's body more than once, no evidence substantiated that claim. Furthermore, very limited forensic evidence linked Kwong to the crime. In court, Kwong pleaded not guilty. He stated that he would not apologize for something he maintained he had not done. He asserted that he had never searched for the grave's location in the canyon and suggested that he was being set up. He claimed he had nothing to add and insisted he played no role in Maribel's death. Kwong suggested that Maribel might have passed away due to an illness. After years of dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and paranoia, prosecutors admitted that the case was largely based on circumstantial evidence, emphasizing that key proof included a library search targeting the exact area where Maribel's body was located. He was detained in the Orange County Jail on $1 million bail. In July 2014, the court found Kwong Choi-Joy guilty of murdering Maribel Ramos. He was sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment. He still maintains that he is innocent. Moving on to the next case. The case of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney. This story began in 2016 in the Argentine city of Mendoza. On January 10th, two young women, 21-year-old Marina Menegazzo and 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney, set out on a highly anticipated trip. Tragically, their journey ultimately led to one of the most publicized investigations in Latin America over the past decade. At that time, Maria Jose was a 22-year-old economics student at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina was a 21-year-old speech therapy student at the Aconcagua University. Both women volunteered with an organization that helped homeless individuals. According to friends and acquaintances, they were two bright and cheerful young women who were extremely close to their families. Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney began a trip with two friends, but the group eventually separated. The girls continued their journey, which started on January 10th. Their route can be traced through Maria Jose Coney's Instagram posts. On January 13th, they were in Cusco, Peru, an ancient city that once served as the capital of the Inca Empire. The following day, January 14th, another photo was posted, also taken in Cusco. A subsequent image was shared on January 15th, showing them on a railway bridge near the Machu Picchu hydroelectric plant. Machu Picchu is a renowned ancient Inca city, often called the city above the clouds, and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo had about 10 days of vacation remaining and were in no hurry to return home. They decided to revisit Montanita, the town in Ecuador where their trip had begun. On February 22nd, Maria Jose Coney posted a photo of herself with Marina Menegazzo on Instagram, which would be her final post. That same day, they contacted their families in Argentina to inform them that they would be returning soon. They planned to take a bus from Ecuador to Lima, Peru, where they would stay at a friend's house for the night. From Lima, they intended to fly to Santiago, Chile on February 25th, and then take a bus to their hometown of Mendoza, Argentina. They told their relatives that they would be unreachable by phone for a few days due to poor signal reception. However, when their relatives tried to contact them, they were unable to reach them. As the days passed, there was no activity on Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo's social media accounts, causing their relatives to become increasingly anxious. Marina Menegazzo's sister used social media to raise awareness about their disappearance. She posted a photo of the girls with a message stating that they had gone missing on Monday, the 22nd, in Montanita, Ecuador, and asked people to share the information. The families were eager to know if the girls had left the country and boarded a flight, but their attempts to contact the airline yielded no response. The family of Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo tried to obtain information from those with whom the girls were supposed to stay before leaving, but they claimed the girls never arrived. The families then reported them missing to emergency services in Ecuador and also contacted the Argentine consulate for assistance. The Argentine consulate became involved on February 27th and sent fingerprints to Ecuador. This was done because a few days earlier, on February 25th, an unidentified woman's body was found in Montanita and taken to Guayaquil. Authorities compared the fingerprints from Argentina with those of the unidentified body and confirmed it was Maria Jose Coney. On Saturday, February 27th, police investigated the area where Maria Jose Coney's body had been found and discovered the body of Marina Menegazzo just 43 yards away. Like Marina Menegazzo's body, Maria Jose Coney's body was also wrapped in a plastic bag and duct tape. According to Ecuadorian police, the killer attempted to conceal Marina Menegazzo's body by placing an object on top of it, which initially prevented its discovery. During the autopsy, the medical examiner determined that Maria Jose Coney's death was caused by severe blunt force trauma to the head. Her injuries also included a broken leg, a broken toe, and what authorities described as genital injuries. Additionally, markings on her wrists suggested she had been restrained. Marina Menegazzo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck and had similar wrist markings, indicating she had also been tied up. The deaths occurred on February 23rd. Toxicology tests revealed that their blood contained high levels of a psychiatric medication. Based on the circumstances surrounding their deaths, police believe that they had not ingested the medication voluntarily and may not have even realized they had consumed it. It is probable that someone had mixed the medication into their food or drinks without their awareness. A breakthrough in the case occurred just 24 hours after the discovery of the second body. The President and Interior Minister of Ecuador announced that the police had made an arrest, generating mixed emotions among the victims' families. Alberto Segundo Minapon, 33, and Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, 39, were taken into custody and quickly confessed to the crime, revealing the sequence of events that had occurred. Physical evidence discovered at the home of one of the suspects, Minapon, included bloodstains. The police also recovered Marina's phone, backpack, and other belongings near the residence. The rapid arrest and immediate confessions of the men were met with skepticism by those following the case, leaving many questions unanswered. Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, José Serrano, stated that the women had checked out of their hotel room on February 22nd at 2 p.m. According to the men's account, their money had been stolen at the hotel, prompting them to hitchhike to Lima. However, the hotel owner disputed this claim, asserting that there was no evidence of theft. Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney's families found this explanation difficult to believe, especially since the girls had credit cards they could have used if they faced financial difficulties. The lack of activity on the credit cards suggested either that someone stole both their cash and cards or that the men's story was false. Moreover, they could have accessed their funds online without needing the physical card, but they did not use the money to book travel or accommodations. According to Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney entered a bar and requested 2 glasses of water because they were thirsty and had no money. The bar owner corroborated this account, stating that she provided them with water due to their financial situation. However, it remains uncertain whether the money had actually been stolen. The minister continued by referencing the testimony of the suspects, who had already confessed to the crime. One of the suspects, Mina, stated that around 8 p.m. that evening, Rodriguez informed him about 2 Argentinian girls at a bar. Mina and Rodriguez approached them and began a conversation, during which Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney explained that they were hitchhiking to Lima because they lacked the funds for a bus ticket. This version of events raises several questions, as they had already purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago, Chile, which is more than 1,000 miles away. It appears illogical that they would attempt to save money by hitchhiking and risk missing their flight, scheduled for February 25th. This conversation with Mina allegedly took place on the evening of February 22nd, making their decision even more perplexing. However, local police found witnesses who corroborated this unusual account. Since Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney had no money for a hotel or hostel and needed a place to stay for the night, Mina offered to let them stay at his house. They accepted his offer. A taxi driver was found who confirmed that he had driven Marina Menegazzo, Maria Jose Coney, and Mina to Mina's home. This image depicts the house where Mina lived. Afterwards, Mina returned to the bar with Rodriguez, as reported by Ecuadorian authorities, and continued drinking. Meanwhile, Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney were left alone in the house. The intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney were no longer present. The police investigation revealed that Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney had visited a nearby store to buy soda before returning to the house. A store cashier confirmed this, indicating that Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney still had some money on them. According to Mina's account, when they returned to the house, he stayed in one room with Maria Jose Coney, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Menegazzo. Pond admitted that he tried to persuade Maria Jose Coney into a romantic encounter, but she resisted and attempted to leave. In a fit of rage, Pond grabbed a stick and struck Maria Jose Coney on the head, killing her instantly. At the same time, he heard a scream coming from another room. Upon entering that room, he discovered that Rodriguez had also killed Marina Menegazzo. Rodriguez immediately fled the scene, leaving Pond to consider how to dispose of the bodies. Pond attempted to eliminate all evidence from the house by wrapping the bodies in plastic bags and duct tape. In the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported the bodies to a wasteland near the ocean shore, approximately 440 yards from his home. It is important to note that this account represents the official version provided by Ecuadorian authorities. However, this narrative leaves several questions unresolved, including the origin of the marks on their wrists and the presence of a potent drug in both girls' blood, as revealed by toxicological analysis. Their family questioned the Ecuadorian authorities' account due to numerous inconsistencies in the case. They suspected a possible link to human trafficking and believed the authorities might be protecting someone. The family's doubts were fueled by several factors. The girls had reportedly run out of money but did not use their credit cards, suggesting they may have been coerced or deceived. Additionally, it was reported that they had been under the influence of drugs, which raised suspicions about their purported activities. Notably, the only individuals who claimed to have seen Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney on the day of their disappearance were a select few who corroborated the authorities' version, including the bar owner, a taxi driver, and a cashier who allegedly sold soda to one of them. Furthermore, the town's relatively small population of 5,000 residents made it surprising that no one else came forward as a witness. The victims' families were perplexed by multiple aspects of the case. They could not understand why the bodies were discovered 2 days apart despite being only 43 yards from each other. It also seemed unusual that Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney had sought help from Mina and Rodriguez, rather than approaching one of the many Argentine tourists in the area. The brother of one of the victims reported seeing used syringes on the floor when he was taken to the crime scene by Ecuadorian police. However, when he inquired about them, the syringes mysteriously disappeared. Moreover, the syringes were not visible in crime scene photographs, and the experts who examined the site denied their existence. The family suspected that Mina and Rodriguez were involved in something more sinister, such as human trafficking, and that they were being used as a cover. Authorities responded by scheduling a second autopsy and a new toxicological examination. Additionally, it was discovered that both defendants had repeatedly changed their account of the events surrounding Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coni's deaths. According to one version, Mina denied involvement in the crime and instead claimed that the perpetrator was a Venezuelan illegal substance dealer known as El Chamo, who lived in the area. However, when questioned by police, El Chamo denied any involvement and offered to take a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample to prove his innocence. The crime scene yielded multiple DNA samples, including those from Mina and the deceased girls, as well as some unidentified samples. Further testing revealed that the unidentified DNA samples did not match Rodriguez, who was suspected of being Mina's accomplice, nor El Chamo, who was ultimately excluded as a suspect. A second autopsy, conducted by Argentine experts, showed that the girls had been in a vulnerable state and unable to defend themselves prior to their deaths. The autopsy also confirmed that they were subjected to forced sexual acts before being killed. Additional findings indicated that Maria Jose Coni had bruises and scratches only on one side of her body, suggesting she may have been ejected from a moving vehicle. Moreover, a new toxicological analysis confirmed that both girls had been administered a potent psychiatric medication capable of impairing a person's willpower. A disturbing reaction spread across Latin America following the incident. Unfortunately, the public response often blamed the victims, holding them responsible for their own deaths. They were criticized not only by ordinary internet users, but also by well-known public figures. At the same time, Berlin hosted a tourism fair where Rira gave an interview to a German news agency. Her comments were alarming, as she claimed that the deaths were inevitable given the manner in which the girls traveled. She also revealed that she had never visited Montanita, a popular tourist destination, because it did not match her social status. These remarks constituted victim blaming at a state level, a deeply troubling and concerning reality. Following the interview with Rira, the Ecuadorian government issued an apology to the families of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coni, and one official was dismissed. Among those heavily criticized was Argentine psychiatrist Hugo Narton, who described the girls as favorable victims and implied that they provoked others to commit crimes. After intense backlash, Dr. Narton stated that he had been misunderstood and emphasized that he never intended to excuse or absolve the perpetrators of their responsibility. A Paraguayan student, Guadalupe Aosta, wrote a Facebook post in response to online comments blaming Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coni for their tragic deaths. The post went viral, receiving over 700,000 reposts within the first week. It began with the haunting words, "Yesterday I was killed." The post described the violent events. "I refused to be touched, and they smashed my skull with a stick, leaving me broken. They put me in a black plastic bag, sealed with duct tape, and threw me on the beach, where I was later found a few hours afterward. The aftermath of my death was more devastating than the act itself. When my body was found, no one bothered to investigate who had taken my life. Instead, I was bombarded with irrelevant and insensitive questions. What was I wearing? Why was I alone? Why did I, a woman, dare to travel by myself? I was in a high-risk area, so what did I expect? The authorities even had the audacity to suggest to my parents that I must have done something wrong, that I must have broken some rule. In death, I realized I was not considered equal to a man. My demise was somehow my fault, and that is the narrative that would be perpetuated. But if the headlines had read, 2 young men found dead, the public would have been outraged, demanding justice and severe punishment for the perpetrators. The response would have been vastly different if I were a man. I am speaking out for myself and for all women who have been silenced, marginalized, and oppressed. I am speaking out for every woman whose dreams have been crushed and whose life has been destroyed. I urge you to raise your voice, to fight for justice and equality. I will be with you in spirit, and I promise that one day there will be so many of us standing together that our voices cannot be silenced." The trial began on August 8, 2016, but faced several setbacks. The prosecutor was replaced 3 times, causing significant delays in the proceedings. Despite these challenges, the prosecution presented a substantial body of evidence, including witness statements and over 200 physical items collected from the crime scene. The police had recovered some of the victim's personal belongings, biological fluids, and phones both from the house where the crime occurred and the surrounding area. During the trial, Pon maintained his innocence, claiming that his earlier confession had been made under police pressure. This assertion only reinforced the suspicions of the victims' families that the Ecuadorian authorities were withholding information. Meanwhile, Rodriguez changed his testimony, suggesting that Colombian dealers of illicit substances had been involved in the deaths. In the trial's first week, the prosecutor revealed that he suspected additional individuals were involved, based on the discovery of 3 more male DNA samples at the crime scene, in addition to the DNA of Rodriguez and Pon. Ultimately, the court found both Pon and Rodriguez guilty and sentenced them to 40 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed under Ecuadorian law. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities arrested José Luis Pérez Castro, a 34-year-old man, after discovering his DNA at the crime scene. Castro's defense team claimed that he had lived in the house a few weeks prior to the incident and that his DNA was present due to a dental infection. They alleged that he had spat blood onto the wall as a result of this infection. However, their explanation for the presence of Castro's DNA on the victims' bodies was that he must have touched an object or piece of furniture previously handled by the police, thereby transferring his DNA. This argument began to collapse when a dentist testified in court. It was revealed that Castro had contacted the dentist 2 weeks after the bodies of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney were discovered, requesting a note to confirm his alleged dental infection. The dentist refused to provide the note, stating that he found no evidence of any health issues during his examination of Castro. A man had been ejected from a dentist's office after requesting a medical certificate. The dentist explained that a certificate required an underlying medical condition causing pain, which he had not observed. This refusal effectively dismantled Castro's defense. Meanwhile, while awaiting trial, Castro violated prison rules by posting on social media about his situation. In a statement, he expressed confidence that God would ultimately prove his innocence. Despite his persistent claims, Castro was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to 40 years in prison, the same sentence as Alberto Pon and Eduardo Rodriguez. Moving on to the next case. Case of Sarah Everard. Sarah Everard was born in June 1987 to Jeremy Everard and Susan Everard. Her father was employed as a professor of electronics at the University of York in England, United Kingdom, and her mother worked in the charity sector. She was the youngest of 3 children in the family, with older siblings, James Everard and Catherine Everard. The family residence was situated in a quiet cul-de-sac in the Heslington area of the city, and Sarah was often seen playing in the street with her siblings and other neighborhood children. She attended the local comprehensive Fulford School in 2005, where she was remembered as an exceptionally likable, lively, caring, and popular girl who excelled in sports and achieved strong academic results. After completing her A-levels, she left Fulford School in 2005 after obtaining a place at Durham University, where she pursued a degree in human geography and graduated in 2008. Sarah began her career as an account executive at Proximity London in July 2008, where she worked for 4 months. After that, she joined Rapier as a senior account manager in September 2009. She worked there for 3 years and 6 months before leaving to work at a travel agency. From February 2021, Sarah was working as a digital account director at McCormick & Morrison, as well as a freelance client lead at Flipside Group, a freelance company. On the evening of March 3, 2021, Sarah was walking home to Brixton Hill from a friend's house near Clapham Common. Unfortunately, something dreadful occurred. The following day, Sarah's boyfriend, Josh, reported her missing to the police. They were meant to meet, but she did not arrive and did not answer any of his calls. Her family and friends were stunned, as she was in frequent contact with them, and it was entirely out of character for her to vanish in that manner. A large-scale search operation was initiated involving hundreds of officers and members of the public. The search focused on the area between Clapham and Brixton, including parks, wooded areas, and other open spaces where CCTV footage had captured Sarah's presence the previous evening. Police stated that she was believed to have walked through Clapham Common after leaving her friend's flat and heading toward her home in Brixton, a journey that should have taken approximately 50 minutes. The police issued a public appeal for information, asking anyone who had seen Sarah or possessed any relevant information that could aid the investigation to come forward. They released footage captured from the dashcam of a passing police vehicle and a private doorbell-style camera, which showed Sarah walking alone along the A205 Pointers Road toward Tulse Hill, south of Brixton. She spoke with her boyfriend on her phone for about 15 minutes and agreed to meet him the next day. It was unclear whether she reached home. The police also released a photograph of Sarah and a description of the clothing she was wearing when last seen. She was dressed in a green rain jacket, navy blue trousers with a white diamond pattern, and turquoise and orange sneakers. It was believed that she was also wearing green earphones and a white beanie hat. The investigation was led by the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Command, which assigned over 120 officers and staff to work on the case. The search was carried out with the support of police dogs, helicopters, and specialist search teams. Specialist officers were brought in from across the force, and the police received more than 120 calls from the public concerning the case. They asked anyone who might have relevant dashcam or other footage to step forward. Sniffer dogs searched gardens and streets around the search site near Everard's presumed route home and in the nearby Oaklands estate. Officers also searched a pond in Clapham Common and drains along the A205. Investigators quickly obtained CCTV footage showing a police officer from the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, later identified as Wayne Couzens, with Sarah Everard on 2 occasions. The footage showed them beside a rented Vauxhall Astra, along with the vehicle's license plate. It was discovered that on February 28, 2021, Couzens had booked a white Vauxhall car from a rental company in Dover. On March 3rd, after completing a 12-hour shift at the U.S. Embassy in London, he traveled to Kent to collect the rented vehicle. Subsequently, he drove back to London, where he was observed in Earl's Court and on Battersea Bridge. Upon arriving in Clapham, he drove to Earl's Court once more before returning to Clapham around the time Sarah Everard disappeared. Couzens had parked the Vauxhall on the pavement outside Pointers Court, stopped Everard, and displayed his police warrant card before handcuffing her. Around that time, Couzens and Everard got into the car, and Couzens drove to Kent, where the vehicle's route was later traced using CCTV and ANPR. Couzens and Everard were seen again in Dover and had switched to Couzens' personal seat car. Couzens then drove to Hodeswood near Ashford, where his car was recorded on CCTV in the area between 3:22 and 6:32 before driving back to Dover to change back into his rental car prior to returning it. The Metropolitan Police subsequently arrested Wayne Couzens, along with a woman, at an address in Kent in connection with Everard's disappearance, and they were taken into custody. However, the woman was later released without charge as detectives continued their inquiry. They discovered that Couzens had informed senior colleagues that he was experiencing stress and no longer wished to carry a firearm. Couzens purchased and filled a petrol container at a service station in Whitfield and then drove to Hodeswood, where his car was captured on CCTV at 12:37. He reported himself sick from work, handing in his equipment, including his police belt and handcuffs, which heightened suspicions of murder. The police searched Hodeswood and discovered human remains that were confirmed to be Everard's body through dental records. Her remains were located in a large builder's bag, approximately 100 meters from a plot of land owned by Couzens. The police also searched the site of a former vehicle repair garage, previously owned by Couzens' family, at the top of the White Cliffs. Detectives questioned Couzens and learned that when his mobile phone had connected to cell sites in the Clapham area, he had sexually assaulted Sarah and strangled her to death using his police duty belt, and he burned Everard's body inside a refrigerator he had purchased. He then bought 2 large builder's bags from B&Q before returning to Hodeswood, where he used one of the bags to dispose of Everard's remains in a pond. He drove his personal car to Sandwich, Kent, disposing of Everard's mobile phone, where police divers searched underwater in one of the town's waterways. The police also concentrated their search operation around the rope walk in Sandwich and sealed off approximately 1 square mile of the town. Sarah's disappearance and the devastating discovery of her remains brought people from all backgrounds together in grief and solidarity. The demand for change resonated through the streets as people raised their voices to call for a safer world for women. Sarah, a lively and compassionate soul, was a cherished daughter, sister, and friend. Her disappearance left her loved ones heartbroken and seeking answers in a world where her safety should have been assured. The investigation determined that Sarah Everard had died from compression of the neck, according to the findings of a post-mortem conducted at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford. Cousins was charged with Everard's kidnapping and murder following authorization from the Crown Prosecution Service. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court and was remanded in custody before appearing at the Old Bailey from Belmarsh Prison. Cousins pleaded guilty to kidnapping and sexual assault and admitted responsibility for Everard's death on the 30th of September. Cousins was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, with Fulford justifying the severity of the punishment by stating that Cousins' use of his position as a police officer to detain Everard was the crucial factor that made the seriousness of this case exceptionally high. Cousins sought permission to appeal against his sentence, but his appeal against the whole life order was dismissed by the Court of Appeal as of December 2021. Cousins was incarcerated at HM Prison Frankland in County Durham and was additionally charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure relating to alleged incidents in January and February 2021. He pleaded guilty to 3 incidents of indecent exposure that occurred in Kent in 2020 and 2021. Sarah's story has prompted significant discussions about women's safety and empowerment, leading to various initiatives and advocacy movements with the common aim of creating a world where women can walk freely without fear. The worldwide outcry for change following Sarah's tragedy called for accountability, respect, and a transformation in societal attitudes toward women's safety. We honor Sarah's memory by striving toward a world where every woman can live without fear, where safety is a fundamental right, and where unity and compassion prevail. Sarah Everard's legacy will be one of resilience, unity, and hope, inspiring us all to stand against violence, support women's rights, and work toward a world where everyone can live without fear. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.